right? By we can choose. Under the law, we have a choice where to get our power, and the way of the world really right now is towards renewable energy already. So we are now opening the floor for discussion. Do you have any questions, clarifications from our guest speaker, Ms. Gian? You may raise your hand or type your questions in the chat box. Or ikaw, Sir Larry, regarding EPIRA Law, Sir Jeff.
Yeah. Sige, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Gian.
Yes, sir.
I know it's not that easy really to apply for the ARCOA GEO for retail aggregation, no? So how long does it take really to apply for this kind of for this one? And then, kasi the retail aggregation is very new, no?
Yes,
and,
sir. It is.
Like property management companies like us, if we have, say, in a vicinity of, of one street that we have 3 or 4 buildings, is that allowed to be aggregated? Things like that.
Okay, sige, sir. So 2 questions, right? So first is, how easy is it to participate in ARCOA or GEOP? And then second, how do we go about retail aggregation? Is that correct, Sir Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. So for the first one, the ease of doing the transition or the switch to an ARCOA or a GEOP supplier should be easy depending on who your selected supplier would be, because your supplier should be able to handle that process of switching for you. Your supplier would coordinate with your distribution utility. Your DU will check if you already have the compliant meters, because to participate in this program, your meters would have to be interval meters. So it would have to be visible to the electricity supply market. So the DU would just have to verify if you already have that. Most of the roadblocks that we see are those that don't have that meter yet. So they would have to ask their distribution utility to upgrade their meter in the process. But most of the time, if it's already in place, it's quite seamless. It could be accomplished in as little as 1 to 2 months. You could switch to your selected supplier. So for the second question, for retail aggregation, this is yes, sir. Go ahead.
On that note, are there upfront fees for for that matter, for the meters and
for the meters? There could be upfront fees for the meters if it's necessary, but most of the time for large end users, the meters are already capable. It's usually the residential kind of meters that are not compliant yet to the supply market. But most of the time, if you're a big industrial or a commercial building, your meters are most likely already compliant. So you would have to pay an upfront cost. And that cost would depend on the meter provider, the distribution utility, on how much they would charge. And there are actually distribution utilities that waive that fee. So it's on a case-to-case basis, depending on where your location is, who operates that franchise area.
But there will be another deposit or things like that for connecting to the.
It would just be, sir. I think from what I heard, at least 50,000 for a meter. That's the most that I've heard for a new meter. But all other fees are just ministerial administrative fees for registration, but not much other fees other than that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
For your second question, sir, on retail aggregation, so it's gonna be a completely new program. There is a pilot set to be launched by December. The first one to do it would be the UP system. So they would be aggregating the Diliman complex, aggregating it together, the different buildings there, to come up to 500 kilowatts. And they would be contracting as a group. So your question, sir, if there are houses in a certain street, as long as your total demand reaches at least 500 kilowatts monthly, you will be able to aggregate.
That's good. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Very good development. Ms. Kian, I know that First Gen have several interests in terms of the renewable energy that you produce. And I also attended another event where you presented those. But what would you say currently is the cheapest renewable energy that we can
Cheapest
tap?
renewable energy.
Because
I guess, ma'am,
mahal na
okay.
talaga.
yes.
Geothermal ka na.
It depends, ma'am, on your level of consumption. So your consumption is determined by your consumption pattern. So some consumers consume it flat on a 24-hour basis. So those are the base load consumers. So most of those usually are big factories, ice plants. They can consume flat. Most of us, like residentials, we have fluctuating consumption. So we are low in the morning or in the early part of the day. We peak in the middle around noon. And then we taper off down around the evening. So that's usually the commercial load. It's usually cheaper to contract on a base load basis than on a fluctuating basis. Yes, and there are different technologies that would cater best to that level of consumption. So base load producers, these are usually the cheapest ones. So historically, we've been conditioned to think that the cheapest base load is coal, right? So it will provide you cheap power flat. But we know now that's being contested, and we know it's not true anymore based on my last power bill. Personally, I know it now. But competition to coal in terms of serving base load is geothermal energy. Now, if you want something that follows, you could have something like hydro, and then complement that with the intermittent ones like solar and wind. So the best for you to contract the best mix of renewable energy, to have it most competitively priced, it would be good to contract it with a provider that could give you a portfolio that will match your consumption pattern.
Right.
Yeah.
So that it's not just one source, but rather we can very much control it, because you can provide from all aspects depending on which is efficient in terms of price.
Yes, ma'am. In terms of the particular customer's consumption needs. So if you need something that follows your consumption movements erratically throughout the day, then you would have to have a technology that could cater to that.
Well, that's good, because a high-end village will be consuming more than 500 kilowatt per month. No?
Yes, sir, definitely, yes.
If you have around 350 houses on a high-end villages, that's a very good alternative now. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And also add to that, so since GEOP started switching at around first quarter of this year, those customers that entered into contracts with 100% renewable energy companies, I think those are the only customers now that are able to say that they have cheap priced power as of today. Because everyone else that have been exposed to fossil fuel supply, we are feeling how the rest of the world is feeling. But since renewable energy contracts are not linked to coal, then it's something that provides competitiveness for clean and renewable power.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for renewable energy, Ms. Gian, is the Philippines being supplied at least 25% for the total load of the country for renewable
historically,
energy?
sir, I think the highest that we've reached was at around 21%. Unfortunately, because of a lot of coal and oil development between 2008 and now, I think we've dwindled a bit, but DOE has recognized this, and they've implemented many of these renewable energy programs to get us back up. And the target now is to bring us to 35% by 2030 and 50% renewable energy supply by 2040.
Oh, okay. Well, Ms. Gian, we have a question in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am.
So, for contestable government institution, which is in conflict with our COA due to RA 9184, may I know the latest development on the proposed GPBB guidelines that is going to be used as a general guidelines in entering with RES? So this is a question from Mr. Vince Arañas of MMR Metro West.
From what I understand, it has been an issue. The issue has been addressed already because, as we've heard, the first pilot for retail aggregation will be a government institution. It will be UP. So it's an issue that has been addressed, and government institutions are also encouraged to participate in these programs of the DOE.
Interesting.
Are there any more questions from our delegates?
Looks like that's it. And that will end our Q&A segment. Thank you, everyone, in listening and interest in this topic. But more importantly is our warm appreciation to our speaker. And therefore, allow me to read this plaque of appreciation. The Philippine Association for Building Administration Incorporated